Dust boiled across breakneck paths in lashing sheets, the wind howling like a runaway train as the freight wagon lurched into a gully and pitched onto its side. Canvas ripped. An axle snapped with a sound like bone. 6 children rolled into the road amid a red cloud. They crawled away, choking, their small silhouettes swallowed by the storm. The driver's seat gaped, empty mules long vanished into the haze. On both sides of the trail, sun-whitened buffalo ribs stuck from drifting sand like warning fingers, and the sky cut the earth in two with a blade of swirling grit. Hattie Granger landed first, knees skidding across gravel. At 14 she was, long-limbed but hollow-cheeked from weeks of salt pork rations. She hauled up Samuel, 9, wiping grit from his watering eyes while her braid slapped her mouth. Samuel clutched Pa's dented tin harmonica to his chest. Clara, 11, climbed, free next, blood from a shallow head cut streaking one temple. Behind her shuffled the 7-year-old twins, Rose and Ben, hands locked so tight their knuckles blanched. Last came Jonah, 5, face smeared fierce with dirt, clutching the wagon's broken doll-no body, only a porcelain head. Lightning flickered. Somewhere inside the dust, turning them all into ghosts, they huddled against the wagon's lee. The world shrunk to roar and grit. Hattie counted heads 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and forced her lungs to slow. Dust stung her eyes. The air tasted of copper. If they stayed, the wagon could crush them. If they ran, the desert would finish the job. Behind the dust curtain something groaned, timber or animal. She couldn't tell and was silenced. She whispered a prayer none could hear and peered down trail. Hoping for anything human, a shape congealed in the copper dusk as though the desert exhaled a man into being. A gaunt sorrel horse picked its way along the grade, ribs like barrel staves. Astride sat a rider wrapped in a trail coat the color of burned coffee. The brim of his hat hid his eyes. He reined in, surveying wreckage and children while the storm hammered his shoulders. One gloved hand soothed the mare. The other rested near a battered Spencer rifle slung beneath his leg. He dismounted without a word, boots sinking a half-inch. Into dust, he knelt, scooped a handful of soil, let it whistle through calloused fingers, studying how the wind carried it. A brief nod, with 2 fingers he beckoned. Hattie's chin lifted, though fear rattled inside her ribs. Trust a stranger or perish. A fresh gust stung their cheeks like ground glass. She pressed Ben's hand into Rose's mouthed follow and moved. The others pressed after her in stooped silence. They stagger-trotted behind him until he angled toward a jagged shale outcrop. Here the wind subsided to a dull moan, as if the stones themselves swallowed it. The rider drew a hunting knife, hacked open a barrel cactus, and caught clear liquid in strips torn from his own bandana. He passed the soaked cloth down the line bend first, then Rose, Clara, Samuel, Jonah, finally Hattie. Bitter sappy, life itself. He opened a second cactus, filling stub-necked canteens from the wreck, his movements brisk and spare as pencil. Mark's dot night spilled in fast, purple erasing copper. The wind died the way a beast dies one last shudder, then stillness. Stars kindled overhead like cold sparks. The man built a low fire, feeding it dry roots that gave off a thin blue flame. Light mapped his face, creased skin, sun-scorched. Beard salted with gray, eyes still unreadable. The children mumbled thanks. He answered with the smallest incline of his head. Hattie checked every scrape, tearing cloth for Rose's knee, dabbing. Clara's cut, straightening Jonah's askew cap. Guilt gnawed her belly. She had urged the driver to push before the pass flooded. Mama's last breath, keep them safe, hat rang like a church bell she could never silence. She risked another. Glance at their silent guardian. Was he salvation or fresh doom? No answer yet, but the twins edged nearer the fire, and Jonah's shivers eased. A coyote yipped in, sharp, carried far by the cool air. Another answered, closer. The drifter rose, a shadow flowing into shape, and unslung the Spencer. Scarred, walnut stock barrel dulled by seasons of dust. He thumbed the lever, brass gleaming in the glow, gaze fixed beyond the fire's reach. He pressed a flat palm toward the ground stay low. The children pressed tighter, a knot of small bodies around Hattie. Firelight caught circles of eyes beyond the stones, 2, 4, then more dancing just outside the halo. Dust, wood smoke, animal musk mingled. Samuel's fingers dug bruises into Hattie's arm. Behind them the mare stamped once, head high. The drifter pivoted, barrel tracking, as though reading words in the dark. Coyotes hushed, but their eyes shone, tiny mirrors longing for weakness, minutes stretched thin as wire. A single mournful howl slid through the hush. The reflections winked out, swallowed by the night. He waited until echo and tension both faded, then lowered the rifle. With a stick he raked the fire, muting it to embers no predator could study. His shadow loomed tall on the rock, then folded small as he settled. Weapon across knees. He pointed at Hattie, tapped 2 fingers to an imagined watch. 2 hours, your watch. Her nod felt heavy, grown. The others curled against her, breaths evening into sleep. She stared into the coals, watching them pulse like the buried heart of the world. Overhead the Milky Way spilled grand and indifferent. Somewhere inside that bright river she imagined Mama and Pa looking down through the rips in the sky. Maybe they sent him, she thought, glancing at the drifter's ragged silhouette. Or maybe the desert cruel as it was sometimes loaned a stranger long enough to tip the scales. Either way, dawn would tell, and she intended to be ready when the light returned. Dawn crept in pale and watchful, washing the canyon walls the color of old ash. The last coyote yipped somewhere downslope, then silence knitted the desert back together. Hattie stirred, stiff from her watch, only to find her sentry post beside. The dying coals empty. A scattering of boot prints, deep-heeled and sure, climbed toward the ridge where a faint pink line split sky from stone. Panic pricked, but a cooler thought followed. He had not slipped away last night when escape was easiest. Wherever he'd gone, he meant to return or meant them to follow. Near the fire sat the battered canteen he'd carried. Bullet dings cratered. The tin. Between them, etched as though by a nail, 2 simple letters. J.R. the drifter's name was still a secret, but the initials felt like a promise left behind. Hattie weighed possibilities while the younger ones drowsed. Ride the opposite way and pray for a town? They had no horse, no map, 1 skin of slimy cactus water. Stay put? Dawn heat would soon turn the pass into a skillet. Follow the stranger? Her pulse jumped at the risk, yet last night's memory of RIF Lesteady courage tipped the scale. If Mama had taught her anything, it was to read actions louder than words. She packed their few things, roused the twins with a whisper, and set her boots inside his tracks, letting leadership settle on. Her shoulders like a too big coat she'd grow into. They were halfway up the shale tongue when trouble found them first. A raw shout cracked the hush. 3 men in patched gray coats burst from behind a sagging juniper. Ex-Confederates by the look of the butternut rags and rusted Springfield muskets. One snapped a lasso wide, rope singing. Before Hattie could yank Jonah back, the noose swallowed him. The boy shrieked as the raider jerked him forward, revolver out, hammer cocked. Dusty boots pounded. Another bandit herded the rest of the children with a bayonet's toothy grin, while the third scarred face, Rocky Mountain cold spat chewing tobacco and called dibs on the pretty filly, meaning Hattie. Gunmetal glinted, heartbeats. Thundered. She counted 6 shots between 2 revolvers and 1 musket they were too lazy to load. Odds were bad, courage thinner, yet her eyes never left Jonah's tiny fists pawing at the rope. A rifle cracked from on high. Rock burst beside the scarred man's boot. Another shot his Colt whipped out of his hand, spinning into dust. The ridge above came alive with echo and smoke. J.R. stood outlined against the spreading sun. Legs braced, Spencer snapping like summer lightning. Short report, leva, report metallic rhythm of certainty. A bullet slammed the musket man's hat. Clean off. The next lodged in his thigh, folding him to the ground. Panicked, the lasso man dragged Jonah around as a shield. J.R. adjusted a hair. 1 clean squeeze. The rope severed. Jonah dropped unharmed while his captor spun. Clutching a smoking shoulder, wind sucked the noise away just in time for a soft tread behind the children. From the Penang gloom stepped a figure dressed in buckskin the color of fawn belly. Single hawk feather at the braid, bow already half drawn, Cheyenne scout, eyes steady as winter stars. Arrowhead gleamed at the surviving raider's throat before he could so much as whisper surrender. The man dropped to his knees, mouth working soundlessly. The scout said nothing. Only a curt nod passed between him and JR. As if they shared history carved deeper than words, dust settled in slow spirals. JR slung the Spencer and walked down the slope with casual precision, cuffing the conscious raider, gathering weapons into a useless pile. Hattie hurried to Jonah, cutting what remained of the rope with her pocket knife. Hands shaking only after the last strand fell, JR checked each child with a quick soldier's once-over, then glanced to the scout. The Cheyenne produced a rabbit-hide water pouch, squat and cool, and offered it not to Hattie but to Jonah, the smallest. The boy sipped, hiccuped, and grinned through leftover tears. The scout 2 moons, JR murmured at last, touched 2 fingers to his own chest, then to the children, a solemn vow and gesture. Without another sound he melted back into chaparral, feet silent as moth wings. The orphans watched him vanish, eyes wider than sunrise. Their drifter guardian reclaimed the canteen marked JR, fastened it to his belt, and tipped his hat to Hattie as though acknowledging her choice. She understood. They were still alive because following him had been the right call. Trust sprouted then, fragile as desert bloom but real. When JR set off toward the horizon, Hattie and her family fell in behind, their footprints mingling with his tracks carved in blood and, somewhere distant, rolling thunder. The sun slipped behind a veil of sickly green clouds, and heat drained from the air in a single shiver. A low throb in the earth made Hattie glance at JR. He had stopped dead, gaze pinned to a copper flash leapfrogging along the far rimrock. The metallic scent before rain coated every breath. Wind fell silent, then reversed, cool and fast, whipping grit backward up the gulch like sparks. Sucked into a bellows, they were already descending the throat of Devil's Gulch when the first pellet of water struck the size of a musket ball, loud as a knuckle rap on tin. Another followed, then a sheet. In seconds the dry arroyo rumbled alive. Pebbles rattled under a skin of sudden water. Brown ribbons braided together, thickening into a rush that clawed at boots. JR scanned the walls, spotted a stubborn mesquite half-grown from a crack 10 feet up. Rope whistled from his hand, loops snagging the trunk on the third throw. He knotted the other end around his waist, braced and beckoned. Hattie pushed Samuel forward first. Torrent up to his shins, then knees, JR hauled, legs wide, and the boy skated across foaming water like a hooked fish, clinging to the rope, arriving gasping against slick stone. Rose and Ben went together, tied belly to back so neither slipped the knot. Clara next, jaw set, eyes bright as struck flint. Each crossing stole seconds while the flood deepened, mud swirling thick as stew. When Jonah's turn came, water reached Hattie's hips, weighty and cold. The rope jerked once. Jonah spun, shoes lost, but JR planted himself and wrenched hard, heaving the child clear. Only Hattie remained. Current hammered her thighs, shoving sideways. She grabbed the rope. Coarse. Hemp burned her palms. Halfway across, a boulder tumbled downstream and slammed her calf. Pain flared white. She lost footing. JR's shout cut through rain-first true sound she'd heard from him above a whisper. He lunged, arms stretched. Fingers caught her forearm and yanked just as the swollen torrent swallowed the place she'd stood. They collapsed against the wall together, water roaring past like locomotive wheels. They limped up a goat trail to a limestone grotto streaked with ancient black soot. Inside, thunder softened to a distant drum. The children huddled while JR struck a spark and coaxed a blue flame from dry juniper bark. Jerky passed hand to hand, salty, tough, glorious. Rain hissed at the cave mouth. Hattie felt the knot. A fear in her chest loosened for the first time since Breakneck Pass. JR sat apart, unwrapping rawhide from his palm. A crescent of skin had split open when he caught her, blood-welled. Hattie rummaged Pa's sewing kit from her satchel. She knelt, thread between lips, needle glinting. He did not flinch as she stitched, only watched her fingers work, eyes the color of wet slate. When she tied the knot and wiped the last bead of red away, he spoke at last, voice husked by disuse. "Keep quiet, breathe slow." 4 words, yet the cave seemed smaller after he said them, the fire warmer. Their eyes held, and something unspoken past the promise, stitched as neatly as the wound. Flames flickered, painting the walls with shifting memories. In their dance, Hattie glimpsed fragments behind his silence. A Union jacket, sleeves soaked and steam dark. A tiny grave marker, leaning in sod. Someone's hand drifting over piano keys, a lullaby silenced mid-note. The images were gone in a blink, but they left an ache like pressed bruises. She understood then that his quiet carried the weight of a family once cherished, now buried, and that protecting them, these ragged strangers, might be the only music. He had left. Footsteps brushed the gulch outside. JR was up. Spencer leveled before the sound reached the children. A figure slipped into view, water cascading from fringed buckskin's 2 moons, braids plastered to his shoulders, bow unstrung. Beneath an oilskin, he knelt by the fire, drew a brittle willow coal along the cave floor, sketching quick lines. The gulch, the pass, a crudely boxed cluster of wagons stamped with the sigil. RB, he tapped the box, then sliced a finger across his own throat. Reynold. Black, Hattie breathed, remembering the name muttered by the wounded raider. 2 moons produced a square of handbill. Wanted runaway child. Good reward. Scrawled over a smudged likeness that could have been any of her. Siblings. Rain east to a patter. JR stared at the drawing until the edges of the handbill curled. From the fire's heat, then shifted his gaze to the children. Fort Garland lay 2 hard days south. Soldiers there would take the orphans, feed them, maybe send them east on the orphan train. Safe if luck held. Northward, however, across Cedar Ridge, sat Reynold Black, the man who meant to change 6 lives for show tent profit. JR's jaw worked as if chewing stone. Hattie pictured Black's hands on Jonah's shoulder, on Rose's braid, and felt dry rage ignite. She stood despite her bruised leg. "We can't run from men like that," she said, voice trembling but clear. "Mama wouldn't—" 2 moons. Grunted approval, tapping his charcoal map where a canyon split offered stealth. JR studied Hattie as, though measuring how much of her mettle came from courage and how much from child's fury, then nodded once. Decision sealed. Thunder rolled east, deeper now, like drums calling soldiers to assembly. The storm outside spent itself in muttered grumbles, but in their small cave a different tempest gathered, one born of flint striking steel, a silent drifter. A Cheyenne scout and a girl of 14 ready to gamble everything on a stand. They banked the fire to embers, packed what little remained dry, and stepped into air scrubbed clean by rain. Moonlight silvered the flooded arroyo already receding. Somewhere beyond those dark folds of land waited tents glowing with stolen laughter. Hattie took Jonah's hand. JR slung the Spencer. 2 moons melted ahead into shadow, and together they walked toward the ridge where choices harden into legend. First light seeped through the gauze of ground fog as they crawled belly-low along Cedar Ridge, below. Reynold Black's outlaw circus sprawled like a blister. 8 striped canvas wagons drawn into a ring. Lanterns guttering before dawn, rifles propped at wagon tongues. Armed sentries shuffled in the murk, coffee tins steaming, silhouettes monstrous in the ghostly light. Whinnies drifted from a picket line, and somewhere a showman's calliope gear clicked aimless teeth, waiting for hands that would never again play it. From the ridge's scraped limestone lip, JR, Hattie, her 5 siblings, and 2 moons surveyed the hive, breath clouding silver, hearts drumming the same taut rhythm. They split like shadow. 2 moons slid toward the horse lines, a silent knife in buckskin. He loosened girths, knotted lead ropes around fetlock joints, sprinkled dried chiltepin under saddle's first jump would bite like bees. Hattie dabbed soot from the cook fire across her siblings' cheeks and her own, erasing pale flashes. She whispered instructions run when she said run, hide if she fell, and tucked Clara's cracked locket inside the girl's shirt. JR Unlatched the Spencer, checked the action once. Fog swirled, cold and metallic, tasting of iron and endings. A guard's cough snapped the stillness. The raid began. JR vaulted the ridge, boots hitting earth with a thud that rolled like thunder. Through canvas walls, a quick slide beneath the nearest wagon steel roof singing as he fired upward. Sparks showered grain sacks, flame licked dry hemp. Gunfire bloomed on every side. Bullets traced snarling white lines through fog, ricocheting off hitch irons. Hattie darted between wheels, found the iron-barred crate where Jonah and Ben had been shoved minutes earlier when a scout caught them moving straw. Lamp oil sloshed inside a feed bucket. She snatched the lantern, heaved it into stacked hay, kicked it hard glass burst, flame whooshed, horses shrieked. She wrenched the cage. Latch. Little arms flung around her neck before she shoved the boys toward the gap 2 moons had sliced in the canvas perimeter. On the supply wagon, Black himself bellowed orders, saber flashing like a struck match. 2 moons met him there, bone knife versus polished steel, boots teetering on a rocking bed. Sparks flared every parry. Blood dotted canvas below like red. Rain, Black roared curses, called them savages, thieves, ghosts, and lunged. 2 moons sidestepped, letting momentum carry the saber into an upright barrel of black powder. A spout of grains poured like dark sand, fuse hung inches away. The ground, had he dragged Clara free of a grappling guard, swung a broken axle like a club, felt it shatter collarbone. Another pistol sighted her crack. JR appeared, shoulder blocking her down as the shot hissed overhead. Second round boomed. He grunted, a red line grazing his ribs. Pain barely slowed the swing of his rifle butt. Iron met Black's jaw as the showman whirled from 2 moons faint. Black toppled, eyes white with disbelief, saber clattering to wheel spokes. 2 moons kicked the blade away, knife poised to finish, but JR raised a palm. Not like this. He bound Black's wrists with the same rope once meant for children's wrists, then tossed him face first into the powder spill. Flames now raced. Wagon canvases, heat ballooning the fog into rolling gold. Horses broke their sabotaged tethers, bucking madly, dragging posts, scattering guards. A wagon exploded in a bloom of orange. Debris rained across the trampled midway. Through smoke. Hattie herded her siblings clear, lungs burning, ears ringing. At the edge of camp, she turned back. JR stood amid sparks, watching the fire claim carnival colors, watching Black writhe, bound, inches from encroaching flames, helpless to escape the show he'd once sold. When it was done, the 6 children, and their 2 unlikely saviors gathered in the cooling hush beyond the ridge, soot-striped small faces. Rain of ash drifted like quiet snowflakes. JR knelt, blood soaking his torn shirt, and laid a hand on Hattie's shoulder. Fort Garland's 2 days, he said, voice raw gravel. Soldiers'll feed you, find families. His eyes, haunted gray, flicked north where empty hills unrolled. Or ride with me. Empty land, empty house? Silence stretched while dawn bloomed rose above the smoking ruins. Hattie's gaze followed the line of his longing. She saw years of lonely road in that stare, losses he never named. Mama's voice stirred inside her, let the hurting mend. She squared her shoulders. We'll take the fort, she answered softly, so you can find your own peace. He inhaled, shaky, then squeezed her shoulder, a father's gesture he never finished elsewhere before pushing a folded map into her palm. 2 moons nodded approval, eyes reflecting early sun like polished flint. A noon stagecoach rattled. Along the military road, dust rooster-tailing behind. Hattie and the children climbed aboard, seats creaking under their small weighted hopes. Jonah pressed tear-wet cheeks to the window. Clara waved her bandaged hand. The coach lurched, wheels, crunching cinders, and rolled away. From the ridge's scorched edge, JR swung into his saddle, 2 moons mounting beside him. They watched until wagon canvas and soot-smeared faces dissolved into horizon shimmer, then turned north, figures dwindling to dark strokes against a crimson sky that promised neither forgiveness nor regret, only distance. fade to black while the quiet clop of retreating hooves echoes like a heartbeat between stars. Sometimes family is found in the silence between heartbeats. On-screen words rise in ember red. If this story moved you, hit like, share your thoughts below, and ride with us by subscribing for more Frontier Tales.